The tyrant's will and the remnants of the Dominion fleet tore through the void, escaping Earth's gravity as fast as their drives could carry them. Overlord Zalvor stood rigid on the command bridge, watching the cursed blue planet shrink on the view screen. The invasion had failed. No, it had never been an invasion. It had been a trap, and they had walked right into it. The silent pursuit. The fleet was in full retreat, engines burning white hot as they prepared for a hyperspace jump. But something felt wrong. A Dominion sensor officer glanced at his screen, his claws trembling. "Overlord, something is following us." Salvor turned sharply. "Impossible. There were no ships on Earth. They have no space fleet." The officer's voice cracked. "It's not ships, sir. It's something else." On the screen, an absence appeared, not a blip, not a signal, but a void in space itself. A distortion in reality, something that sensors could not comprehend. And it was moving. Following them, the impossible strike. Without warning, one of the Dominion warships vanished. No explosion, no debris. It was just gone. The bridge fell into stunned silence. Then another ship blinked out of existence. Then another. Panic erupted across the fleet. Officers barked desperate orders, but nothing worked. Weapons locked onto empty space. Shields flickered against an enemy they couldn't see. Something was hunting them, and it was using their own technology against them. The final revelation. Salvor's mind raced. How would humans do this? They were a young species, a primitive species. But then he remembered. The way their forces had disappeared without a fight. The way their own ships had returned, but changed. The final message, written in the Dominion's own language. Earth had never been alone. Something else had been watching from the shadows, waiting for a moment like this. And the Dominion had woken it up. Prepare the jump. Now. Salvor roared. The ship's drives spun up. Hyperspace calculations competed in record time. The fleet, or what was left of it, jumped blindly into the unknown. And as they fled, the last transmission from Earth echoed through their systems one final time. "Run while you can. We will find you." The Dominion had come to conquer Earth. But now, across the cold void of space, Earth was coming for them. The massive citadel floated above a dying red star, its dark metal surface reflecting the last, fading light of the ancient sun. Inside, the Grand Council of the Galactic Dominion gathered, their forms towering and strange. Aliens from 100 worlds, rulers of countless civilizations. They had crushed empires, burned planets, and rewritten history to their liking. At the center of the vast chamber stood Overlord Zalvor, the supreme ruler of the Dominion. His exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian, his many eyes scanning the room with cold arrogance. He raised a clawed hand, silencing the murmurs of lesser warlords. "The time has come," Zalvor declared, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "Earth has resisted long enough. They must surrender, or be erased from existence." A low murmur spread across the chamber. Earth, a planet of warriors, a species that should have been crushed long ago, yet somehow they had survived. Their refusal to bow had become an insult to the Dominion's power. A reptilian general stepped forward, his golden armor reflecting the dim light. "They are nothing but primitives," he sneered. "Their weapons are outdated. Their fleets are lockable. A single Dominion warship could destroy their entire world." Laughter filled the room. The council members had seen this pattern before. Weak species who resisted for a time, only to fall like all the rest. Salvor allowed the amusement to continue for a moment before raising a hand once more. Silence returned. "We will offer them one chance," he said, his voice colder now. "A simple choice. Surrender or die." He turned to a dark-skinned alien with long, curling tendrils framing his face. "Chancellor Velka, the Dominion's master of diplomacy. Send the transmission," Zalvor ordered. Velka bowed and activated a holographic console. A message was crafted, laced with the usual threats, the usual promises of mercy for those who submitted. It was a message sent to countless worlds before. To the leaders of Earth, the message began. "You stand before the might of the Galactic Dominion. Surrender your planet, your armies, and your people. Accept our rule, and you will be allowed to live. Resist, and you will share the fate of those who defied us before, forgotten, wiped from history. You have one solar cycle to decide. Choose wisely." The transmission was sent across the void of space, racing toward Earth at the speed of light. In the council chamber, a silence followed. It was done. Soon, Earth would bow. Or so they believed. A warlord chuckled. "Perhaps they will surprise us and actually surrender this time." Another general smirked. "Or perhaps we will have the pleasure of burning their world to ash." Salvor leaned back in his throne, satisfied. He had conquered thousands of worlds. Earth would be no different. But something lingered in the air, a feeling, a presence, a darkness that none of them noticed. Far away, beyond the Dominion's reach, deep within the shadows of space, something stirred, and Earth was already preparing to answer. The Galactic Dominion's war fleet cut through the void of space like a storm of steel on fire. Hundreds of warships, each the size of a city, moved in perfect formation. Their hulls were covered in ancient battle scars, marks of conquest from thousands of defeated civilizations. At the head of the armada, aboard the flagship Torrance Will, Overlord Zalvor watched the distant blue-green world of Earth grow larger on the view screen. The humans had been given a choice: surrender or die. They had chosen defiance. A reptilian admiral stood beside Zalvor, his scaled hands tapping against a control panel. "Shall we begin planetary bombardment?" he asked, his voice smooth, calculated. Zalvor shook his head. "No, let's give them a final chance." A Dominion warship detached from the fleet, gliding toward Earth's upper atmosphere. It carried an elite force of Dominion diplomats, soldiers, and scientists, beings who had delivered ultimatums to countless worlds before. From orbit, they sent a final transmission. "This is your last opportunity. Submit now and your people will be spared." For a long moment, Earth was silent. No response. No surrender. The Dominion envoy commander smirked. "Foolish." Then, without warning, their ship's system shut down. Vanishing in the void, the warship lurched violently, its lights flickering. The crew scrambled, claws tapping against controls, but nothing responded. "What's happening?" one of them shouted. The answer came too late. From the darkness of space, something pulled the ship downward. Gravity should not have behaved this way. It was unnatural, calculated like an unseen hand reaching from below. The flagship, Torrance Will, received a garbled distress signal. The last words of the crew were barely audible. "We are not alone." Then, silence. The ship was gone. No explosion. No debris. No trace. As if it had never existed. The Dominion reacts. A heavy silence settled over the command bridge of Zalvor's flagship. The warlords stood frozen, their smug confidence beginning to crack. A scientist checked his readings 3 times before whispering, "That's impossible." The admiral's claws dug into the console. "It must be a human weapon, a planetary defense system. We should proceed with an attack." Salvor did not respond immediately. He stared at the planet below, his many eyes narrowing. Earth should have been defenseless. No other species had ever done this to a Dominion vessel. Something was wrong. Still, he would not show weakness. He turned to the fleet commanders. "Advance the second wave. Full planetary scan. I want to know what happened." Across the fleet, more warships moved forward. They would find the truth. Also, they thought, because in the shadows of Earth's orbit, something watched them back. And it was ready. The Galactic Dominion's warships glided toward Earth, their weapons primed, their sensors scanning every inch of the planet's surface. Their first envoy had vanished without a trace, but Overlord Zalvor refused to believe it was anything more than human trickery. The Dominion had crushed civilizations far more advanced than Earth. A single primitive planet could not possibly be a threat. But then, the second wave vanished too. Ghosts in the dark. One moment, the warships were transmitting data. The next, silence. No explosions, no wreckage. Just gone. The command bridge of Torrance Will was deathly quiet. The warlords, once so smug, now shifted uneasily. A pale-skinned Dominion tactician hissed, "This is no planetary defense system. This is something else." Salvor clenched his clawed fists. He had seen terror before, on the faces of conquered species, in the dying gasps of broken worlds, but never in his own people. He would not allow fear. "Launch ground troops," he ordered. "We will end this personally." Earth's first move. As the Dominion dropships descended through the atmosphere, the troops inside prepared for war. They expected burning cities, frightened humans, desperate resistance. Instead, they landed in silence. No soldiers, no civilians, no movement. A squad of elite Dominion warriors stepped forward cautiously, scanning their surroundings. Their sensors flickered with interference. Then, one of them screamed. The others spun around, but he was gone. No gunfire, no struggle, just missing. Panic set in. The squad leader barked orders. "Regroup, defensive positions." But one by one, they disappeared. Shadows moved in the fog. Whispers echoed through the empty streets. The last transmission from the ground forces came in a frantic burst of static. They see us. We don't see them. It's silence. The Dominion's invasion force was vanishing, without a single shot fired. Salvor's realization. Back on the tyrant's will, Salvor watched as his unstoppable army was being picked apart by ghosts. His claws tapped against the arm of his throne. No species has ever resisted us like this. The reptilian admiral swallowed hard. Overlord, I recommend a full retreat. Salvor turned to face him. His many eyes burned with rage. Retreat? From a single planet? But deep inside, a cold thought crept into his mind. This was not an ordinary war. Something was hunting his forces, and Earth was still waiting. The war room aboard the tyrant's will was filled with a suffocating silence. Reports from the ground had stopped. The elite warriors of the Galactic Dominion, the same forces that had crushed empires and reduced planets to ash, had vanished without a trace. Overlord Salvor stared at the holographic display, his many eyes scanning the battlefield that refused to reveal itself. No bodies, no wreckage, no signs of battle, just nothing. A Dominion warlord, his scaled face pale with unease, stepped forward. We have no explanation, Overlord. No enemy signatures, no energy readings. It's as if our troops simply disappeared. Another officer, voice shaking, whispered, "This is unnatural." Salvor slammed a clawed fist against the throne's armrest. There is no such thing as unnatural. Find the enemy. But that was the problem. There was no enemy to find. The false retreat. Desperate to regain control, Salvor devised a plan. A false retreat. If the humans were truly hiding in the shadows, perhaps they would make a mistake if the Dominion appeared to flee. The fleet prepared for a staged withdrawal, pulling back toward open space. Warlords, soldiers, and strategists watched the planet below, waiting for the enemy to reveal itself. But then, the fleet's long-range sensors detected something impossible. Hundreds of Dominion signals, beacons from their missing soldiers and ships, had reappeared. But they were not on Earth. They were behind the fleet. Impossible, an officer whispered. The readings made no sense. The lost soldiers, the vanished ships. They were supposed to be dead. The horror unfolds. A transmission came through. It was one of their own ships, its identification code confirming it belonged to the first invasion wave. But something was wrong. The ship was drifting toward the fleet. No controlled flight, no response to hails. Then, against all protocol, the docking bay doors of the Tyrant's Will were opened, and the ship was pulled inside. Armed guards rushed to the hangar, weapons raised. The warlords watched from the command center's monitors as the ship's ramp lowered. A single Dominion soldier stepped out. His armor was scratched, dented, and covered in something dark. His faceplate was shattered, and his eyes were human. Then the lights in the hangar flickered, and the screaming began. Earth's true power reveals itself. The alarms blared as the Tyrant's Will descended into chaos. Reports of things inside the ship flooded the comms, things that should not exist. Salvor rose from his throne, his mind racing. What? Had we awakened? No one had an answer. Because Earth had never been the prey. It had been the trap. The halls of the Tyrant's Will burned with chaos. Alarms screamed, lights flickered, and soldiers, the Dominion's finest, vanished into the darkness. Overlord Salvor stood frozen, his many eyes locked onto the screen. The soldier who had stepped off the derelict ship was wrong. His armor was Dominion-made, but his eyes, those empty, human eyes, did not belong to him. Then, in a voice that was both his and not his, he spoke. You shouldn't have come here. Then all power on the Tyrant's Will failed. The fall of a flagship. The mighty warship, the pride of the Galactic Dominion, became nothing more than a floating tomb. The emergency lights cast long, flickering shadows across the corridors as Dominion soldiers scrambled to contain the impossible. Seal the doors. A warlord barked, his voice barely masking his terror. The doors slammed shut, but the moment they did, the screaming started inside the sealed room. A soldier raised his weapon, shaking. How? Nothing got in. But something had. Something they couldn't see. Something that had been waiting. One by one, soldiers disappeared. No gunfire. No struggle. Just gone. Salvor's mind raced. This wasn't war. This wasn't resistance. This was a warning. Earth's final message. The lights flickered again, and the main screen hijacked itself. The image of Earth filled the display, but this time, it was overlaid with a message. No voice, no commands, just simple, unaltered text. Leave. Salvor's claws dug into the throne. Retreat. The warlords turned in shock. Overlord? Salvor's voice was like steel. Now. There was no discussion. No bravado. The Galactic Dominion had conquered thousands of worlds, but this was different. This was something else. Ships powered up. Drives roared to life. The Dominion fleet turned, fleeing from Earth's gravity well as fast as physics would allow. But as the tyrants were prepared to jump to hyperspace, one mass message appeared on the screen. The text was different this time. It was written in the Dominion's own language, a language humans should not have known. It read, "Next time, there will be no survivors." Salvor's breath caught. He realized, too late, the horrifying truth. Earth wasn't just fighting back. Earth had been studying them. And the next time the Dominion returned, it would be Earth's turn to invade. The message from the Galactic Dominion sped through the endless black of space, carried by encrypted signals and subspace relays. It reached Earth's defense network in minutes, and within the hour, it was in the hands of the planet's leaders. Inside a secure underground command center, deep beneath the surface, the most powerful minds of Earth gathered around a holographic display. Generals, scientists, strategists, each had faced impossible odds before. But this was different. The Dominion had come. The hologram flickered to life. Overlord Zolvor's message played in cold, measured tones, filled with the arrogance of a species that had never known true defeat. Surrender your planet, accept our rule, or be erased from history. A heady silence filled the war room. Then a slow, deliberate chuckle broke it. A grizzled general, his uniform decorated with hard-earned scars of past conflicts, leaned forward. His voice carried no fear, only amusement. Same old speech, he muttered. Different tyrant. The president of Earth, an unshaken woman with steel in her eyes, folded her arms. They think we're weak. A scientist adjusted his glasses, scanning the data on a floating screen. They must not know what happened to the last invaders. Another voice, calm and cold, cut through the discussion. Then let's remind them. The president turned to a communications officer. Send our response. The officer hesitated. And what do you want to say? The president didn't blink. Keep it simple. The officer nodded and typed the response. Across the depths of space, Earth's message traveled back to the Dominion's citadel, piercing through the overconfidence of an empire that had never been defied. The reply contained only 4 words. Come and take it. Meanwhile, light years away, the Galactic Dominion's War Council stood waiting. Overlord Zalvor leaned forward on his throne, expecting the same tired submission he had heard 1,000 times before. The message arrived, a single line of text. His many eyes narrowed, his claws tightened against the arms of his throne. He read it again. Then he laughed. Not a laugh of amusement, but of disbelief. Earth was not afraid. They were challenging him. The warlords surrounding him exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen defiance before, but never this bold. A younger officer, his voice tinged with hesitation, spoke up. Should we prepare for negotiations? Salvor turned his gaze to the officer, his expression darkening. No. He stood, his towering form casting a long shadow across the chamber. Prepare the fleet. Far beyond the Dominion's understanding, deep in the cold void, something stirred. And Earth was already waiting.